What is going on, everybody? Travis Fowler, Harkrider, is back once again this week with another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles, coming back after a week's layoff to celebrate Moa's birthday. I just wanted to take that time to have fun with my friends and family. So last week we took the week off, but now we're back again this week. So let's get right into it and talk some pro wrestling, because there's been a lot to talk about, at least in ring-wise, as well as some stuff that we've seen take place behind the scenes with some rumors that are coming about, and we'll talk about what I think a potential storyline will bring here in the very near future. But in ring-wise, everything's been pretty solid. I can't really complain about a whole lot of stuff outside of maybe the one Bad Blood match, which I think we may have talked about on a previous episode. But there was only a handful of bad moments on Bad Blood. But we had Wrestledream take place last week, and I gotta say that it was probably the first time since AEW's inception that I actually was not really that too keen on watching an AEW pay-per-view. I still did watch a good amount of it, but I didn't even really go back and watch anything I had missed. I didn't care about a lot of the matches that were taking place. I felt like some of them were just there for the sake of being there. And I know people will kind of harp on the whole, well, you always say you want story, and not necessarily just me, but in general, people like me that prefer more of the dramatic story elements as opposed to wrestling matches, because after you have the match, you need to have somewhere to go with it, which has always been the argument. Is it more important for story, or is it just the wrestling that should matter? Most people that have followed me on this podcast, you've heard me say and preach a dozen different times, story is always going to take proponent over anything else when it comes to professional wrestling. It's what I prefer, it's my taste, and I've actually started learning a little bit more that maybe I've always been this way. And this is even dating back to my WCW threshold days, because watching some WCW stuff recently, I've begun to really understand that there are a lot of similarities between them and AEW. Not necessarily when it comes to a lot of storyline structure. I will say, for the most part, AEW has had more compelling stories as opposed to what WCW did. But something that I've been realizing more and more is that WCW, much like AEW, was very keen on doing matches for just matches. There wasn't a whole lot of basis to go off of some of these. There were times where it was, and for the most part, there was at least some kind of build-up, which, by the way, people, when you hear a build-up, especially when it comes to a title situation, a story doesn't always mean you have to have a long, drawn-out narrative. The story can simply be, you have a number one contenders match to determine a number one contender for such title. You get that number one contender. Maybe you have a week or two's worth of build, and then you go into the match. Sometimes you can do that. Honestly, it's not something that's too far-fetched, and that can still be a story that you get out of it, because you never know. It could lead to a longer story if things go the way that they want them to go, or maybe it was a story that they didn't realize would be worth something, and then you have the match and see that, oh, maybe there's something more here, and then you can continue from there. Tournaments are always a great story, and some people will be like, well, how does that work? Because the tournament itself is the story, and if you need somebody to explain that to you, then you're probably already losing a lot more than just your knowledge for wrestling. I'd probably want to get a brain check on that as well. But overall, back to that. I'm sorry I went on a tangent. In ring-wise, it's been very fun. The Wrestledream, two matches that stood out, which were the only two I really cared about, was the triple threat match for the international title, where Konosuke Takeshita actually picked up the win, and I wasn't too surprised that they went that. I honestly was very much expecting Ricochet to get that title, but in a good twist of events, I actually thought it was great that Takeshita took home that title. Kyle Fletcher making the heel turn against Will Ospreay is great story booking there. I think they're going to be in for a long feud. And Don Callis, who's been making moves recently. We've seen him acquire Lance Archer now. Maybe they'll finally do something with him. I have been a Lance Archer fan for years, and I've been waiting for them to pull a trigger on him. Finally, with this, I hate saying it, but this Drew McIntyre Timu look kind of going on right now. I think he has a chance to be something worth AEW's time. And Brian Cage as well, finally getting his opportunity, and now he's television champion. It looks like they have now split him off from the Gates of Agony, and now they're on their own. I think they even cut a promo on Ring of Honor this week stating how they're on their own. But that's been good stuff there. WWE has still piqued my interest for the most part. This Crown Jewel Championship thing is just kind of dumb to me, honestly. I really am just not here for it. I want them to get this done and out of the way so that we can focus back on the main stories. The Cody Rhodes and KO story is, I said it 2 months ago when they did the match at Bash in Berlin, that this was going to lead to a better story, that you're going to see payoff in a long form. And man, don't I hate being right? But no, I don't. I love that I am right about this because I could just see it. I could see that this was not going to be what the AJ Styles situation was, where it was just Cody showing the respect to his opponent, and then, they have a killer match and so on and so forth. Same with Logan Paul. I knew that this was going to be one that they would sink their teeth into because there's so much that you can go into. The actual relationship with Cody and Kevin, which they've played off greatly. The Randy Orton bond that's there with KO now, and the past relationship that we've seen with Cody and Randy. That's going to be something that comes into play during this story. It won't surprise me if somehow Orton and Rhodes is the WrestleMania direction, although I kind of think that we still are going to see Rhodes and Cena. That's my opinion. I will hold to that until WrestleMania comes, but that plays into another part of this story that I'll get into here in a little bit. There has just been a lot of intrigue for that. I can't wait to see where they go with that story. The Bloodline story is still very much fresh and good. I think Solo Sikoa has officially come into his own as a leader, and his character work, his promos have been great. I think he has really taken to this rogue tribal chief thing. That we know The Rock has something to do with this. I said a long time ago that it, in my opinion, is going to come to the story of Rock is the one that called for Roman to be kicked out of his spot after he lost the title, and Solo was given that accolade by The Rock strictly because we saw on that big old diagram that he showed back at the WrestleMania 41 kickoff presser, it showed Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but there was another little title there that some people saw, some people referenced. I noticed it, and I had a feeling that this would come into play at some point in time, and I still hold firm that that will take place. Under The Rock, it said not tribal chief, high chief. So high chief, tribal chief. A tribe is a group of people. The high chief could, I believe, in their culture means you're reigning over all the tribes. So your word basically is law, and it trumps that of the tribal chief word, if you will. So I think that's where they're going with that. This might be the first War Games where it's going to be a 4-on-4 situation as opposed to the 5-on-5 format we've seen, at least on the main roster, over the last couple years. They have done 4-on-4 with the NXT brand before, but it's been the 5-on-5 format since they introduced War Games on the main roster. I'm always a big fan of at least 4-man team War Games matches, or even in general, the traditional Survivor Series tag team match was a 5-on-5, but then they would shorten it every once in a while to a 4-on-4. So and I could be wrong about the traditional part, because now that I'm thinking about it, maybe even the traditional way was originally 4-on-4. There's just a back and forth there. But I am okay if we have Bloodline, new Bloodline, that of the Tongans, Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa taking on OG Bloodline in the form of Roman Reigns, the Usos, who we can just guarantee that they are going to get reunited. Jay has had his conversations with Jimmy these past couple weeks. Roman even said, hey, I'm proud of you, but there wasn't like an I'm sorry there. And I bet that's what we're going to get from Jay Uso. That's what he's wanting, I should say, is what he's waiting for is an apology. Like, you screwed me, you mistreated me, and now you just want me to drop everything that I've been doing successfully over on Raw to come and help you in your problem. When I said I was done with you, I was done with you, and he's holding firm to that. But I'm pretty sure we're going to see that reuniting, if not this week, then next week for sure. I can't wait to see it. Maybe, you know what? I'm not even going to say next week either, because I think they're going to try to build this out closer till after the Crown Jewel event, closer to Survivor Series. So I would say probably about second to third week of November, which would be right before the Survivor Series. You'll see at least some form of the reuniting take place. But who's the fourth guy that I think they're going to get for the Bloodline? Well, everybody else has thought it. I think you can do it too. Don't do Cody. He's busy with KO. But you can go with Sami Zayn. And I do believe they will recruit him. Obviously, they've kept that seed planted of Jay and Sami's relationship being repaired over on Raw. I can totally see Jay making the phone call of like, yo, Honore Us, you want to make a jump for a night? I think that can happen. I believe that's where we're going to end up going. So don't be surprised if this year's War Games is going to be 4-on-4 of new Bloodline. Once again, Fatu, the Tongans, and Sikoa taking on OG Bloodline of Zayn, Usos, and Roman. That's my prediction, and I'm sticking with it until something weird takes place that trumps that completely. Man. One thing I do have to talk about on the Raw side is I do think they have started to kind of lose a little bit of allure with Gunter, with him not being around as much. I know that they've been putting focus mainly on the Intercontinental title and the story with Jey Uso and Braun Breaker lately, as well as trying to give other stories a chance to shine. Specifically, the Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley, and Dominic Mysterio, which has been the most compelling storyline on Raw this entire year, really. And it all started back in January, I believe, is when you could make the argument that this storyline really started. Liv getting injured and then coming back helped kick it into overdrive. The stuff they did while Rhea was away really helped cement that. We'll have some more about the Judgment Day here in just a little bit too, some backstage rumors. But I think they're starting to lose a little bit of that momentum with that big storyline. I know they've added Raquel Rodriguez to be the heater for Liv Morgan. I don't think that's a bad combo, considering that even though it was the most random team at a time when obviously there was no women's teams really in WWE to go for those titles, Morgan and Rodriguez have history now, so it gave her a reason to get that heater. I'm glad she's being used, she being Raquel, but I think now we'll see it make a little bit more sense as to why she joined the Judgment Day, because she had that history with Liv. I think a lot of people actually enjoy that story element. Plus, there's been history with Rhea as well. If you recall, back in Black and Gold NXT days, I believe it was even during pandemic NXT days, there was a killer last woman standing match between Raquel Rodriguez and Rhea Ripley, where Rodriguez came out the victor after she powerbombed Rhea Ripley through the stage, if I recall correctly, was the spot. So that was amazing to see. Let's talk about two debuts this week. I was extremely happy to see one of them, and then on one, I was very pleasantly surprised. Due to the rumors that had been going around, we got it confirmed on Monday Night Raw. We saw the return of the tag team Ivar and Eric, the War Raiders. I I really do wonder if they're going to make them go back to the Hanson and Rowe names. I still really hope that happens. But I guess if they stick with the Eric Ivar names, they can still do the Viking theme that they are still looking like they're going with. But they were equipped with their old NXT theme again. They had a brand new logo. They came out not in any kind of face paint, but it looked like traditional War Machine back in the day vibes with these new War Raiders. So I was glad to see both those guys back. It looks like they're both healthy and ready to go. But Friday Night SmackDown, I was stoked for it. And yes, it was a little lackluster because of the crowd, and maybe they weren't too familiar with it because it was one of those markets that maybe wasn't as wrestling heavy. But you can guarantee next week that's going to be a whole different story. But we saw this week, finally, the debut of Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, the Motor City Machine Guns. And they are calling them the Motor City Machine Guns. Some speculated they would just be MCMG. That did not happen. I am so stoked to see these guys. They had a great debut outing. Again, a lot of stuff fell flat just because this audience isn't used to them, and there really wasn't like a build-up for them outside of the vignettes, which really didn't show faces or names until the final one. So people can be forgiven if they didn't understand who that was. And I know there's hypocrisy when they're like, well, AEW does that all the time. And again, somebody like me, I can forgive that because sure, I can go and do my own research. But when you're a casual viewer, that's where you have an issue. WWE caters to a casual viewer, where AEW does not. And that's where the argument always comes in. But I digress, and we'll talk about that at another time. MCMG, Shelley, and Sabin finally coming on to the scene of WWE. I am so happy they're here, and honestly, I'm glad they chose the E over AEW, strictly because we've seen a lot of the matches over there already. These guys have a chance to really not only freshen up a tag division, but there is a young tag division on both brands, so you can honestly make the argument for both War Raiders and MCMG as well, but specifically on SmackDown, I think you can utilize Sabin and Shelley along with other teams such as DIY and Street Profits to really help mold and shape a good tag team division, especially with the younger guys like Los Garza, A-Town Down Under, and a few others that I'm sure we haven't seen on a regular basis but could very well use any kind of help you can get to help build that division. Pretty Deadly, there you go, there's another one. They are entertaining as can be, but having these veterans on your roster is amazing for the young generation that is coming behind them. But oh man, I cannot wait for next week's SmackDown because of their little mini tag tournament they did. We are going to see it next week in Brooklyn, so this match is going to be hot fire. DIY, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa taking on Motor City Machine Guns, Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley. You're going to see a barn burner. I'm just telling you now. I call it, and you can hold me to these words. I cannot wait for next Friday's SmackDown. That match is going to be amazing. I'm going to go with Sabin and Shelley picking up the win and going against the Bloodline because, hey, we get another little rivalry renewed there as it would be the Motor City Machine Guns against the GOD, Guerrillas of Destiny. And to add to that as well, you could tell that the War Raiders were happy about the Machine Guns coming over because in the same week they came back, the Guns debut, and I believe it was Ivar who posted the photo. If not, obviously it was the other one and Eric, but they posted an old Ring of Honor promo shot where it had the two going against each other, and the MCMG were the ROH Tag Team Champions at the time. So this has been a fun week. I've been very happy as a pro wrestling fan, and like I said, you can't get the smile on my face. I was so happy to see Sabin and Shelley. I just am so happy about wrestling right now because it is the healthiest that it's been since honestly the territory days. It's been honestly the most profitable since the Monday Night War era, which is an amazing thing. I never thought we would see wrestling hit this kind of popularity again, and while I will argue it still has not hit that level as what the Attitude Era did and with the WCW stars and the WWE stars we had back then. I don't think we're going to reach that popularity again, at least not just yet. But to say that we have definitively your Rock Austin of this generation in the form of Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes leading the charge, along with all of the other veterans that are on this roster, like your Randy Ortons, your Kevin Owens, Sami Zayns, your current crop of great wrestlers like your Gunters, and even Ludwig Kaiser, your female division, which has been unbelievable, especially in NXT when you have Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade, along with Stephanie Vaquer, and you also got Julia now. They are on the up and up with NXT. Their group of guys down there too. Trick Williams, All Ego Ethan Page, so many names. And then on the main roster for the women, Nia Jax has been doing phenomenal work. Bayley is still always reliable. Naomi's there. Tiffany Stratton, who's a personal fave, is going to be a big deal. And all I want for Mania is her and Charlotte Flair. But that's, again, just something that I am speaking into existence and hoping it happens for WrestleMania this year. There's just so much to be happy about, even on the AEW side as well. Their talent roster is stacked. It is unquestionable that they have so much amazing talent over there. I know that's always been the gripe against AEW, but hey, you know what? You can have too little or too much, and I think I would rather have too much right now, but you also got to find something to do with all these guys. So hopefully something will take place. I did see something where Tony Khan mentioned that he has played around with the idea of a brand split, which he should do. You've got it right there. Split it with AEW and ROH. There's your brand split. There's your two brands. If you want to go the WWE route and do a Dynamite roster and a Collision roster, then go that route. We know that there was already something that was for real about that at one point in time. I don't know if that's the case anymore since CM Punk is no longer there, but if you want to go that route, sure. But I think the AEW ROH route, split rosters, would be the better bet. But all that to say, I still see problems in AEW, and a lot of people do. A lot of people talk about the low attendance and the ratings continuing to decline. I know Eric Bischoff's been famous for saying the ratings decline is something that is pivotal and they need to really watch that. The low attendance, though, according to some reports, is starting to get to some of the stars backstage. No names have been mentioned as to exactly who, but you can make the argument that if I'm a talent on that roster, when you book a 4,000, 5,000, or hell, even a potential 10,000 seat arena, and you're not even able to fill it to 20 to 25% capacity, that's a real issue, and that's an issue that needs to be addressed. That's what I think some fans like JD New York, who was a very big AEW mark for the first 3 years, and famously lately he has called a lot of things that have been wrong with AEW, which is not to say that he's the only one that's been saying it, but Tony Khan fired back at him, and he really should take the idea of don't fire back at your critics. Instead, maybe actually take it and think maybe they're right. I think that's been Tony's biggest problem, is that he just doesn't seem to want to admit that what he's doing isn't working. And I don't know why. But I do know that just selling straight up wrestling is not going to work. I talked about how I'd noticed some similarities with WCW and AEW. That's been one of them. WCW was very wrestling heavy. Hell, WCW, for instance, invigorated and really put the cruiserweight division on maps, where we have seen Lucha Libre come over. We saw stars from Japan. We saw homegrown stars on WCW TV. You saw cruiserweight action where guys were doing, the quote, flippy dippy stuff even back then. So that's why somebody like me doesn't have a problem with that style of wrestling, because I saw it all the way back then. But you're increasing the risk. You're doing things just for the sake of doing them. Whereas I think I can make an argument that the stuff you would see on the cruiserweight division back then had a lot more rhyme and meaning to them. I think that's the biggest problem with AEW, is they need to really understand that just putting on a wrestling show is not going to draw money, and it's not going to draw a significant crowd, except for like your big pay-per-views, which we have seen take place. But this isn't Japan. This is not Japan, where your standard house show is going to draw a huge crowd and sell out an arena, unless it's a small arena, which if you look at some of those Japan sellouts, they have been smaller arenas. So if you want to take that approach, then maybe book a smaller venue. Look into more of like a residency venue, like what they did in Arlington for Collision on those, I think it was like a 4-week, a full month schedule. They just booked that one venue and it worked. They did all the ROH tapings there, the Collision tapings. That works. Go more that route if you want to be just known as a wrestling show. To truly be the alternative, fine. That is perfectly fine. But you need to find a better way to bring fans in, to make your show profitable, and to be a legit success. Because right now, the strategy that Tony Khan has employed has not been working to the full extent that you would hope it would. While we still are on AEW, let's get some bad stuff out of the way, actually for both AEW and for WWE, because it's injury related. Unfortunately, this one's not necessarily an injury, but it's more of an illness. There's been a report that Killswitch, also known as Luchasaurus, had some medical conditions come up that has taken him off TV, and according to Dave Meltzer, so take it for what it's worth, he could be done. As in completely out. And that's sad because I felt like there was a real story there that was going to eventually pay off, where Killswitch was going to inevitably turn on Christian Cage and the patriarchy. It doesn't look like, though, that we're going to get that. Or if we do, it's not going to be for some time. So, it's one of those things that's disheartening for Killswitch. I hope for the best, but at this point, it looks like we should expect the worst. Another time to talk about Bryan Danielson, and obviously the Wrestledream match was the other one I was very intrigued by, and it was a good match. The post-match beatdown and subsequent angle of the whole bag thing, I get why people are soured on the bag situation. It's not necessarily what I would do either, but it is what it is. And it was a way to get Bryan off TV for a lot more than just, a day or so or a week or so. He hasn't been working with an AEW contract, and his neck issues have been getting worse. So we know that now officially his full-time in-ring career is done. There's rumors as to whether or not he'll even be able to compete on a part-time basis due to this injury, because he is going to have neck surgery here sooner rather than later. He's been quoted as saying he wants to spend time with his family at the moment, and he knows he's going to have to get neck surgery here pretty quick. So right now it looks like he's just taking a hiatus. It could be for a while. It could be for good. It has been noted that it looks like he's going to return to AEW if indeed he does come back, whether it be as a part-time wrestler or even just as somebody to help out backstage. I hope, honestly, nothing but the best for Bryan Danielson, as well, as he has had a great career for both companies. He has been world renowned, and honestly, he had a good outing on all three of the main shows. His last Raw match, is something that I saw, was against Seth Rollins in a barn burner. His last match on SmackDown was with Roman Reigns in another barn burner, which was the end of his WWE career. And now this last AEW match, for now, was against Jon Moxley. So he took on all three members of the Shield in his last matches for each of the respective shows. So that's pretty cool. That's a cool little nod that I saw there. Another star that's out, though, that looks like he's going to be out for a year plus, was the returning AJ Styles. I was really hoping that we would see some kind of interaction with Styles and the Guns being on SmackDown, but it looks like we're going to have to wait a while for that. I can't remember what the name of the injury is that Styles got, but unfortunately, it looks like it's going to keep him out. It was a foot situation where he landed wrong on one of the spots, and it just did not go well for him after he had just come back from a layoff. So unfortunate, but Styles, get better, and hopefully we'll see the Phenomenal One back also sooner rather than later. Couple of news to talk about. Carlito may be getting a singles push and exiled from the Judgment Day. I think that would actually be fun for Carlito because we saw that he's still in great shape and he's funny. So his little Judgment Day character has had his one-liners, which has been amazing, but his humor, along with getting an opportunity to really shine back on his own in this return, I think would be great for him because we've only seen him interact with factions since he's been back, LWO and now Judgment Day. So hopefully if he can get that singles push, we see more out of him on this run because he deserves it. He's still got a lot left in the tank, and reportedly that's what officials have said about him as well. Another individual that has made headlines, Brock Lesnar, rumored to be coming back soon. That was per WrestleVotes, but Fightful came out and said that as of this moment, according to their source, Brock Lesnar's name is not on any kind of roster, and there are no plans for him for the foreseeable future. I echo a sentiment I saw from somebody else. It probably wouldn't be the smartest thing to bring Brock Lesnar back while there's a federal investigation going on, especially in a case that involves him. So, yeah, I think Lesnar is okay to be stayed away from for the moment. Will he come back in the future? I don't know. Have we seen the last of Brock Lesnar? It's possible. But right now, I think it definitely would not be a good idea. It would be a PR nightmare to bring Lesnar back. As entertaining as he has been in his last run, I think right now he's kind of persona non grata right now. So let's kind of keep it that way until things at least cool off, or at the very least till we see what this federal investigation uncovers, even more so than what they have already. Finally, a little bit of local professional wrestling news. If you live in the state of Oklahoma, you remember a situation that took place with the AEW show back in January where they had Nyla Rose, who is a transgendered wrestler, compete against biological women on the show, which went against OSACA, which is the Oklahoma State Athletic Commission. It went against their rules because they do not condone man-on-woman violence. And this is just, again, talking about the specifics here. Nyla Rose, biologically born a male, transgendered to a female. They still put that as a sport. They recognize professional wrestling as a sport in the state of Oklahoma, and they make the professional wrestling abide by sports rules, which is to have no intergender contact in any sport, really. And that caused some uproar, especially if you're somebody who works in the state of Oklahoma. And I know of one guy in particular who has been putting in the work to try to get this overturned. Mr. Logan Knight had made a lot of effort to try and get this changed so that we could have more opportunities here in the state of Oklahoma. And unfortunately, it's one of those things where you have to find a representative to change I believe it's looked at as a constitutional law here in Oklahoma, as opposed to just an athletics commission's rule. It's a little disheartening, and I will say this. I've got my own personal feelings about transgender situation and everything like that. It's none that I prefer to share here. It's one of those things where that is too sensitive of a topic that I believe should be held only to conversations in persons with people, no matter what side of the fence you fall on. But I will say this. I do think it is a bit ridiculous to hold professional wrestling to the same standards that you do an actual sport, because professional wrestling has been admitted to being strictly entertainment. And there's been loads of examples of man-on-woman violence and woman-on-man violence in professional wrestling because it's a show. It's been choreographed. We are staging certain things to take place. It's no different than watching man-on-woman or woman-on-man violence in movies or TV shows. It's really no different than that. And when it comes to pro wrestling, it doesn't matter, in my opinion, if you're transgendered or biological, male, female, whatever. This is a safely conducted athletic display where you don't have to worry about something tragically going wrong in the sense of, oh, a woman's going to get severely hurt by a man. We take risks taking a simple bump. That's the main risk there. but we are taught to cooperate with each other. And especially in professional wrestling, it's a little ridiculous to say that a woman versus a man shouldn't happen and is being held by real sports rules when professional wrestling has been entertainment. So my stance on it, I don't think it should be a rule that's had here. Unfortunately, that's how it's been struck down, and it doesn't look like it's going to change at least anytime soon. Hopefully it will sometime in the future, and there can be a representative that gets that overturned. But for now, the struggle continues, and transgendered wrestling will not take place in the state of Oklahoma, at least through OSAC. Now, there is tribal land here, so there could be exceptions to that rule. Guys, that's all I got for you. What are your thoughts on some of these stories we've talked about today? Whether it be the Osaka upholding their stance on transgender wrestling, or anything that's gone on both WWE and AEW television. Sound off in those comments down below. Make sure you're following us on all of our socials. Make sure you've subscribed to this channel and you hit your little bell notification so you're notified when there is a video uploaded. Make sure you're following us on Facebook under the Four Corner Podcast banner still. X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find us there. TNT Pod, Tights and Turnbuckles is also how you can search for us. And I will be back next week to talk more about this wacky, crazy world of professional wrestling. Until then, y'all take care, have a wonderful week, and just continue to love pro wrestling.